Alright, let's take this script and give it a more human, less robotic feel. We'll keep everything you've got, though, every word, every marker, every citation. No cheating here. His voice, it kinda shook, like a whisper you'd barely hear, but it held the weight of like 20 years of just cold, calculated nastiness. He made me disappear for 20 years. 20 years? Now this wasn't like locked in some creepy basement or tossed in a shallow grave, nope. This was way worse, way more messed up, a vanishing from life itself. This isn't some tale about being physically snatched away. Nah, it's a seriously chilling story about psychological warfare, this slow, planned-out way of just erasing who someone is. So, I'm your narrator. For a long time now, I've been digging into the really dark parts of what people do, finding stories that barely even made the news. This is the stuff they didn't tell you. Over the next 18 minutes, you're gonna see this incredibly detailed 20-year plan to just shatter a woman's entire reality. You'll see how control can be like a slow poison, how your sense of self can just get chipped away, and what it's like to live your whole life under a heavy shadow. The whole thing kicks off like so many awful stories do with this picture of perfection. A marriage that looked great, a husband who seemed loving. James Kifer, he put on a real show of being the ideal guy. Seriously, by everyone's account, he was the perfect husband. Charming, doing well for himself, seemed totally devoted. To Sarah, the woman who'd become his victim, he was everything she'd ever dreamed of. He only wanted what was best for me, she'd say later, and you can just hear the gut-wrenching irony in those words now. He told me he was keeping me safe. But hiding behind all that supposed caring, a seriously sinister plan was brewing. Kifer wasn't protecting Sarah, he was cutting her off. He was super carefully building this cage when nobody else could see, but for her it was suffocatingly real. At first the signs were super subtle, easily brushed off as just normal relationship stuff, like suggesting she quit her job but saying it was 'cause he wanted her to take it easy. Or gently pushing her away from friends and family, saying they just needed to focus on their new life together. He painted this picture that the outside world was just awful, not to be trusted. A world where only he with his constant love could possibly keep her safe. And Sarah, blinded by love and trust, she started to buy it. Her world started to shrink, her friends, fewer and fewer, her dreams, they just kind of faded away. She became more and more reliant on Kifer, her whole reality seen through his eyes, his words. This wasn't some sudden snap or a big angry explosion. This was a 20-year-long campaign to just wear her down, mentally. A slow, patient effort to dismantle a woman's spirit, her confidence, who she even was. He was making her disappear, little by painful little piece. The truly awful extent of Kifer's depravity, though, wouldn't come out for years, not until his whole carefully built world started to fall apart. This wasn't just about control, it was about making her gone. Back in March 2020, James Kifer, then 53, got hit with charges for something truly horrifying, a murder-for-hire plot to kill his own wife. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. This was the end result of a plan that had been cooking for 2 decades. Source: FBI press release indictment details. The indictment laid it all out. From at least March 2020 all the way through October 2020, Kifer was actively trying to find someone to murder victim 1, his wife. Source: FBI press release indictment details. He wasn't just trying to make her disappear from his life. He was literally trying to make her disappear from existence altogether. The plan itself was carried out with this chilling precision. Kifer truly thought he was pulling off the perfect crime, a way to get rid of his wife without getting his own hands dirty. He figured he could erase her just like he'd been trying to erase her identity for years. But the wheels of justice, they might grind slow sometimes, but they keep turning. Law enforcement, including the FBI, they started to pick apart Kifer's scheme. They found proof of his attempts to hire someone to kill her. The investigation eventually led to Kifer's arrest and him facing court. That whole act of the devoted husband, it completely shattered, showing the cold, calculating predator underneath. Then in July 2021, James Kifer from Nottingham, Maryland, finally had to face the music for his awful plot. A man from Baltimore County got sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for arranging the murder for hire of his wife. Source: Baltimore Sun. That sentence, a solid 20 years plus 3 years of supervised release afterward, was a pretty clear message about how serious his actions were. Source: U.S. Department of Justice. Federal prosecutors announced the sentencing, really hammering home how deliberate Kifer's plan was to have his wife killed. Source: WBL-TV. This wasn't just some attempt. This was a calculated 20-year effort that ended with him directly ordering his wife's death. He was trying to hire someone to commit the ultimate violent act against the woman he had promised to love and protect. Source: Court Listener. The victim, Sarah, she had no idea how much real danger she was in for most of this time. She was living under the illusion of a normal marriage while her husband was actively planning her death. Her slow fade from her social life, her growing isolation that had created the perfect breeding ground for Kifer's messed-up plan to thrive. The psychological games had made her vulnerable, dependent, and in Kifer's twisted view, an easy target. He'd spent 2 decades methodically tearing down her support system, her confidence, her will to fight back. He had pretty much set the stage for her ultimate erasure. That murder-for-hire plot wasn't some random event. It was the terrifying peak of this long, constant campaign of emotional abuse. Kifer's goal wasn't just to control Sarah, but to completely get rid of her, leaving absolutely no trace of her ever existing. The sentence he got was for the murder-for-hire attempt, sure, but it also felt like a reckoning for those 20 years of control, those 20 years of making Sarah disappear from her own life. Just try to imagine living for 2 whole decades under the constant, subtle pressure from someone who's dead set on making your world smaller, making you doubt yourself, cutting you off from everything that gives you strength. And then imagine that person deciding to take the final step, to literally end your life. This is the story of James Kifer and his incredibly disturbing 20-year plot. A story that really serves as a serious warning about how sneaky control can be and just how far some people will go to achieve their ultimate destructive desires. The headlines focused on a murder-for-hire plot, but what really happened was a slow-motion assassination of a spirit, an identity, a whole life. This dive into the darkness, it's only just getting started. Watching someone slowly fall apart, it's just absolutely terrifying. It's not like a sudden break, nope. It's more like a slow erosion, a systematic taking apart of who they are. For Sarah, this whole awful process, it was all set up by the guy who swore to keep her safe. Mark Kifer, he didn't just want a divorce. He wanted Sarah gone, like completely erased, as if she'd never even been a part of his life. His way of doing it wasn't just one big, decisive thing, but a whole campaign of messing with her head. A super planned-out scheme that started not with a weapon, but with just, words. You're just imagining things. That never happened, You're going crazy. These weren't just throwaway lines. Nah, they were like tools. Mark used them like a surgeon, cutting into Sarah's reality, little by agonizing little piece. This is the really sneaky part of gaslighting, a tactic designed to make the person on the receiving end seriously question their own sanity. Mark's goal was super clear. Mess with Sarah's head, make her doubt what she saw, what she remembered, like her whole grasp on what was even real. When your memories get shot down all the time, when what you've been through is constantly denied, your brain just starts to shatter. Source: FBI press release indictment details. Just picture it, that constant, annoying drip of doubts. Maybe he forgot an anniversary or missed an appointment or swore up and down a conversation never even happened. Each time, no matter how small it seemed, it just chipped away at Sarah's confidence. He'd twist what she said, warp her intentions, until she was just left feeling totally lost and confused. This wasn't some accident, it was a whole strategy. By messing with her ability to trust herself, Mark created this situation where Sarah became more and more reliant on his version of things, his take on the world, her own internal compass. It started spinning like crazy, leaving her totally vulnerable. Source: Investigative Journalism, Tier 1 Local News. The damage was just devastating. Sarah started suffering big time. Even sleep didn't offer much of a break. It was filled with anxiety and this awful, gnawing feeling of unease. During the day, the weight of this fake reality he'd created just pressed down on her, leading to this deep, all-encompassing depression. She felt stuck not by actual walls, but by the limits of her own mind, a mind that Mark had so carefully messed with. Feeling like you're trapped inside yourself, unable to trust your own thoughts or feelings. That's a really unique and profound kind of torture, believe me. Source: Government Press Release Court Record. Friends and family, the people who might have noticed the subtle changes happening, they were kept way out of the loop. Mark, being a total master manipulator, probably spun tales about Sarah being unstable, overly emotional, or maybe even, paranoid. He isolated her, cutting off any possible help or validation she might get from others. This isolation is super important for the abuser, because it removes any outside checks on their made-up story. When the victim support system is weakened or just gone, the abuser's control becomes almost total. The stories from people who did notice Sarah changing are often kind of fuzzy because of Mark's influence. Or maybe they just didn't get how deep the psychological manipulation really went. They might have seen a woman who was struggling, sure, but they couldn't see the invisible strings Mark was yanking. Source: FBI press release indictment details. The legal papers, they lay out Mark's intent in pretty stark terms, detailing how he tried to find someone to murder his wife. Source: FBI press release indictment details. These attempts, which went on for months, show this chilling determination that was way beyond just normal marital problems. While the court records talk about the plan to hire a hitman, they also, kind of imply the psychological torture Sarah went through. This wasn't a guy just wanting a simple separation. This was a guy trying to arrange the complete destruction of his wife, both physically and through his constant gaslighting mentally. He wanted her gone from his life and ultimately from existence itself. The sheer nerve of planning a murder for hire while also systematically destroying his wife's sense of self, it shows this terrifying two-sidedness. From around March 2020 all the way through October 2020, Mark Kifer was actively trying to end Sarah's life. Source: FBI press release indictment details. This whole time, which was filled with his calculated psychological abuse, he was also getting into more obvious, deadly planning. The two parts of his campaign, the slow breaking down of Sarah's mind and the desperate, violent plan to end her life, were totally connected. One set the stage for the other, making Sarah a more vulnerable target, maybe even less likely to fight back or be believed if something bad happened to her. The legal stuff later brought these horrible actions to light, but for Sarah, the whole ordeal had been like living a nightmare, a slow slide into a darkness she just couldn't get out of. The sentencing of James Kifer to 20 years in federal prison for this murder-for-hire plot really serves as a grim reminder of how serious his actions were. Source: government press release court record. Source: investigative journalism, Tier 1 local news. But that sentence, as fair as it is, can't erase the years of manipulation, the sense of self that was stolen, the emotional and psychological scars that are still there. This wasn't just some legal case, it was the documented destruction of a woman's reality by the guy who was supposed to be her partner. The plot to make her disappear was complex, a chilling mix of psychological torment and deadly intent, a 20-year obsession that ended in a desperate criminal scheme. Source: FBI press release indictment details. Alright, let's dig into this and make it sound a little more human, like we're actually talking about it. So for 20 whole years, Sarah was just living under this, suffocating cloud. Mark's control, man, it was like this slow-acting poison he was just so good at giving her. It wasn't just about keeping her away from people, no way, it was this whole, plan to just break down her spirit, her will, who she even was. Every little nudge, every doubt he planted, it just chipped away at her until she hardly even remembered the awesome woman she used to be. But hey, even when things are totally ground down, you still have that little spark, right? That survival instinct. It's gonna yell louder than the fear eventually. For Sarah, that moment wasn't some big explosion, it was just this super clear, cold realization. That constant nagging worry just turned into this solid, unwavering decision. She just couldn't do this life anymore, this whole fake show Mark was putting on. She had to find a way out, and this thought, man, it lit up a strength she didn't even know she had. Mark totally thought he had her beat, but he seriously underestimated how tough she was. When he thought she was just drowning in sadness, Sarah was actually, planning stuff. Her brain, which he'd been squashing for so long, suddenly kicked into overdrive, working with this desperate focus. She started writing everything down, the times he twisted things around, his threats, how he was acting more and more nuts. Every quiet phone call, every shady meeting became another piece of the secret puzzle she was putting together. She got really good at hiding her fear, playing the role of the beaten-down wife, all while collecting the ammo she'd need to get her life back. It was seriously risky, like walking a tightrope, but the other option was just this slow, soul-crushing fade-out. Now the whole reason Mark got so obsessed, those seeds were planted ages ago. His master plan, which he'd been cooking up for 2 decades, wasn't just about having control, it was about making her disappear completely. He didn't see Sarah as his wife, he saw her as a problem. Later on, the evidence came out, and it was just chilling. Mark Kifer, 53, from Nottingham, wasn't just messing with her head. He was actually trying to pay someone to kill his wife. From around March 2020 all the way through October 2020, Kifer was trying to find someone to murder his wife. Source: FBI press release indictment details. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing, this was a planned-out cold-as-ice operation. But get this, the trap was actually snapping shut on Mark, not Sarah. Her quiet resistance, the secret recordings she made, all the evidence she gathered so carefully, it all built this case that was just impossible to ignore. The cops who knew all about Kifer's twisted plan were closing in. The big finale wasn't some dramatic showdown in the dark, nope. It was about his whole fake world falling apart because of the very system he thought he was running. Finding out about this murder-for-hire thing totally shook up their whole town. A guy from Baltimore County got sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for trying to hire someone to kill his wife. Source: Baltimore Sun. And the crazy part, it went even deeper than that. This wasn't some one-off weird thing. The investigators found this disturbing pattern with him. Mark Kifer had a history of these controlling relationships. This really messed up need to have total power. His reason wasn't love or even jealousy like you usually see. It was something way more twisted, this desire to just wipe her out, control what happened to her future, maybe even for money, or to keep up this whole act he'd built on lies. He ended up getting 20 years in federal prison, plus 3 years of supervised release afterward, for plotting to have his wife killed. Source: government press release court record. His 20-year scheme to make Sarah vanish had ironically landed him right behind bars. It's a pretty chilling reminder of what happens when obsession gets totally out of control. Alright, let's dive into this next part, folks. It's about the fallout and not just the legal kind. So Mark's looking at serious jail time, a solid 2 decades behind bars federally, which, yeah, that's a hefty chunk of life, showing just how seriously the law views what went down. Source: Justice, Gov, but for Sarah, her path forward, it's not really about payback or punishment anymore. It's about piecing herself back together, a real journey toward healing. This whole nightmare, all those years of being played and living in fear, it leaves some seriously deep emotional wounds, man. What Mark put Sarah through wasn't some punch in the face or anything like that. Nah, it was way sneakier, a real gut punch of psychological abuse. Think of it like a slow-acting, nasty poison, super hard for the person going through it, and even people on the outside to even spot it. It just chips away at your self-esteem, makes you feel all alone, and can seriously mess with your head, making you doubt everything you think is real. Spotting those red flags, the constant put-downs, the gaslighting, being cut off from everyone, and that suffocating control, that's the absolute key, the first real move to taking your life back. Sarah's toughness, it's like a shining example, truly. But honestly, nobody should have to go through that kind of trauma by themselves. Having a solid crew in your corner, your buddies, your family, maybe a support group, seriously, you just can't stress that enough. And getting in touch with a mental health pro. That's where you get the real tools, the roadmap you need to actually start recovering. The human spirit, it's got this unbelievable power to bounce back. Even after going through something so gutting, so full of betrayal and straight-up terror, it is possible to rebuild. You can find happiness again, and yet you can come out the other side even stronger. Sarah's story, as messed up and dark as it started, it really just hammers home how powerful hope can be. So hey, if you're nodding along thinking, man, this sounds like me or someone I know, please reach out. Don't try to tough this out alone. There are people and places that can help, and getting better, it's totally doable.